the emperor is Chinese, and so are all his people. This story happened a great many years ago, but perhaps all the more it is as well to hear it again now, before it is forgotten. The emperor's palace was a wonder of the world, and in his gardens the most magnificent flowers bloomed. Beyond the gardens was a forest, sloping down to the deep blue sea where the ships passed to and fro, and in the forest lived a nightingale who sang so beautifully that even the poor fishermen who had so much else to do would stop to listen and say, "How beautiful that is." Travelers far and wide, the world over, would come to the emperor's city, and they admired the city and the palace and the gardens. But when they heard the nightingale, they all said, "Ah, that is the best of all." And when they returned home, they told of all they had seen, and learned scholars wrote it all down in books, going into great detail about the emperor's city and palace and gardens, and not forgetting the nightingale, that she was the best of all. And these books went out all around the world, until at last some of them came into the hands of the emperor himself, as he sat in his golden chair and read and nodded, well pleased with the glowing descriptions of his city and his palace and his garden. But the nightingale is the best of all. What, nightingale? I don't know of any nightingale. Can there be such a bird in my empire, and even in my very garden, and I do not know it? Astonishing, it may be learned from books. So he called for his Lord Chamberlain, a man so exalted that if anyone of inferior rank happened to speak to him, he would only answer, which means nothing. It says here that there is a most remarkable bird called Nightingale. They say she is the best thing in all my vast empire. Why have I never heard of this? I've never heard the name, Your Majesty, said the Lord Chamberlain. She has not been presented at court. It is my wish to hear her sing. The whole world knows what I possess better than I do myself. Maybe a mere fancy, invented by writers of books, suggested the Chamberlain. Your Majesty cannot believe everything found in that book. Much of it is fiction, or even what is called the black art. But the book in which I have read this account was sent to me by the great and mighty Emperor of Japan, and therefore it cannot contain a falsehood. I will hear the nightingale. She must be here, tonight. If she is not forthcoming, I will have the entire court taken to be thumped in the stomach directly after supper. So off went the Chamberlain to seek the nightingale. But where to find her? All through the palace he went, up the stairs and down the stairs, through all the halls and corridors, and half the court ran with him, for it was not at all pleasant to be thumped in the stomach, especially just after supper. But not one of them had ever heard of the wonderful nightingale. So there was a great inquiry at court after the whereabouts of the bird that all the world knew, but was unheard of in the palace. Finally, they came upon a little girl working in the kitchens who said, "Nightingale? Oh yes, of course. I know her quite well. When I go home to visit my poor sick mother who lives by the seashore, I pass through the forest. Sometimes I stop to rest in the woods, and there I hear her sing. It's just as if my mother kissed me." "Little girl," said the Chamberlain, "I will obtain for you a permanent position of employment in the kitchens, along with permission to see His Majesty the Emperor dine, if you will lead us to the nightingale, for she is expected at court this evening." So the little girl led the way to the forest where the nightingale sang. As they went along, they heard a curious sound. "There it is now," said a court page. "What a surprisingly powerful voice for such a small creature. I'm sure I've heard it before." "No," said the little girl. "That is a cow, mooing." But we were still far from the place. Next came another sound began rising out of the marsh. Ah, splendid, said the palace chaplain, like temple chimes. No, said the little girl, that's frogs. But I think we should hear her soon. We're nearly there. And at that moment, the nightingale began to sing. There it is! That's it, said the little girl. Listen! And there she sits. She pointed up at a little gray bird perched among the branches. Is it possible, said the chamberlain. I never thought she could look like that. Such a plain, common, ordinary thing. She must surely have lost color and gone pale at the sight of so many distinguished persons all together. Little Nightingale, called the bird, our noble emperor wishes to hear you sing. With great pleasure, said the bird, and burst into song, most delightfully. Sounds like little glass bells, said the chamberlain. And see how her little throat works. It is surprising we have never heard of this before. She will be a great success at court. Most excellent little Nightingale, continued. I have the honor to invite you to a reception at the palace, where you will delight His Majesty the Emperor with your charming song. My song sounds best in the green woods, said the bird. But she came willingly when she heard it was the Emperor's wish. At the palace, everything had been scrubbed and polished and decorated for the occasion. All the best flowers from the Emperor's garden had been brought in to fill the halls and corridors. And there was such a bustle of coming and going, you could hardly hear yourself speak. In the center of the great throne room, a little golden perch had been set up for the nightingale. And everyone gathered around. The little girl from the kitchens had got permission to stand by the door. She now had the official title of Imperial Potcook. All the court was there, all dressed in their best, and every eye was fastened on the little gray bird, to whom the Emperor graciously nodded to begin. And she sang so beautifully that tears came to the Emperor's eyes and ran down his cheeks, and every heart was touched. The Emperor was so delighted he would have had his own golden slipper hung round the bird's neck, but she declined this great honor with thanks. I have seen tears in the Emperor's eyes, she said. That is my greatest reward, and quite treasure enough for me. And she sang again, more delightfully than before. Said all the ladies of the court, and they all took water in their mouths to gargle and trying to sound like the nightingale. And even the footmen and chambermaids had no fault to find, which is saying a good deal, for they are the hardest to please. All in all, the nightingale was a complete success. She was now to live at the palace. She had her own golden cage, with leave to go out twice a day and once during the night. On these occasions, she was attended by 12 servants, each holding on to a silk string tied fast round the bird's leg. There was not much fun in such flying. The whole city spoke of the wonderful bird, and when two people met in the streets, one would say, night, and the other, gale, and both would sigh. 11 street vendors' children were named after her, but not one could sing a note. One day, the Emperor received a package which was labeled Nightingale. This must be a new book about our famous bird, said the Emperor. But it was not a book. Inside was a work of art. A mechanical clockwork nightingale made to look like the real one and covered all over with diamonds and rubies and sapphires. When it was wound up, it could sing like the real nightingale. And its tail bobbed up and down, all flashing with silver and gold. Around its neck hung a ribbon which was inscribed, "The Emperor of Japan's Nightingale is poor compared with that of the Emperor of China." "How exquisite!" everyone exclaimed. "Now they must sing together. Let's have a duet." So the two birds sang together. But that did not go so well, for the living nightingale sang in her own natural way whatever came into her head, while the mechanical bird could only sing its one song by rote. So the mechanical bird had to sing alone, and it was quite as successful as the real one, and besides, it was so much prettier to look at, all sparkling like bracelets and breastpins. 33 times it sang the same song without growing tired, and everyone would gladly have heard it yet again. Only the emperor said the living bird should have a turn to sing something. But where was she? No one had noticed when she had quietly flown out the open window and back to her own home in her beloved green forest. "But what can this mean?" exclaimed the emperor. And all the courtiers said that the nightingale was a most ungrateful creature. "But we still have the best bird after all," they said, and heard the mechanical bird again. This now was the 34th time they had heard the same piece, and yet they still had not learned it quite by heart, for it was an intricate and rather difficult piece. And the music master praised the bird exceedingly and declared that it was even superior to the real nightingale, not only for its outward plumage, but also for its inner works. For you see, ladies and gentlemen, and most especially your Imperial Majesty, with a real nightingale, one never knows what to expect. But with a clockwork bird, everything is settled in advance. It can be opened and explained. The wheels and gears examined to show how the music is produced, one note following the next. "That is exactly what we think too," the whole court replied. And when the music master exhibited the bird to the public in concert the following Sunday, all the people were as pleased as if they had been making merry with tea, which is quite a Chinese custom. They all pointed and nodded and said, "Oh." But the old fisherman, who had heard the real nightingale, shook his head slowly and sighed. "It sounds very pretty," he said, "very much like the real thing, and yet something is missing. I have no idea what." After this, the real nightingale was banished from the land, and the mechanical bird had a place on a silk velvet cushion by the emperor's bedside. Wreaths of gold and precious jewels piled up around it. The music master wrote a 25-volume treatise about the mechanical bird, very long and very learned, and full of difficult Chinese words, which everyone claimed to have read because they did not wish to appear stupid. By the end of the year, the emperor, his court, and all the people of China knew each chirp and twitter of the mechanical bird's song. And they liked it all the better, for now they could sing it for themselves. And they did. The children sang it in the streets, and the emperor himself sang it. Oh, it was most popular. But one evening, when the bird was singing at its best, something inside the bird snapped. The wheels and gears ran down, and the music stopped. The emperor sprang out of bed, calling for a doctor. But what could he do? So they sent for a watchmaker, and after a good deal of poking and prodding, tinkering and tampering, the bird was patched up after a fashion and put into something like order. But he said it would now have to be used very sparingly, for the cylinders were worn and could not be replaced without injuring the music. This was terrible, for now the bird could only be played once a year, and even that was risky. But the music master made a short speech full of long words, saying that the bird was as good as ever. So, of course, it must be so. Now 5 years passed, and a real sorrow fell on the land. For the Chinese people truly loved their emperor. Now he lay so ill that he was not expected to live. Already, A new emperor had been chosen, and the people stood in the streets to ask the Lord Chamberlain how the old emperor did. But he would only answer and shook his head sadly. He lay within, in the palace, where all the halls and passages had been draped with heavy cloth to silence any footstep. All the courtiers thought he was dead, and they all ran off to pay their respects to his successor. But the emperor was not dead yet. Cold, stiff, and pale he lay on his sumptuous imperial bed. Through an open window, the moon shone down on the emperor and the mechanical bird. The emperor could hardly breathe. It felt as though there was a great, heavy weight on his chest. He opened his eyes and saw death sitting there at his heart. He was wearing the emperor's crown. In one hand he held his golden sword, in the other the imperial banner. From the folds of the curtains around the bed, curious faces peered out. Some were hideous and awful. Others were lovely, gentle, and kind. These were the emperor's deeds, bad and good, which came back to him now that death sat in his heart. "Do you remember? Do you remember?" they whispered to one another, and spoke of things that made cold sweat break out on the emperor's brow. "No," he said. "No, I will not remember. I know nothing about it. Music! Music! Sound the great Chinese drum, that I may not hear what they say." But still they went on, whispering, while death listened and nodded to every word. "Music! Music!" gasped the emperor. "You, precious little golden bird, I've given you gold and costly jewels. I've even hung my my own golden slipper around your neck. Sing, I beg you, sing." But the bird was silent. There was no one to wind it up, so it could not sing. Death stared down at the emperor with his great hollow eyes, and all was still and deathly silent. Suddenly, through the open window came a burst of glorious song. It was the living Nightingale who had returned, and who had heard of the emperor's illness, and who had come back to sing to him of hope and comfort. And as she sang, the faces round the bed grew fainter and paler, and the blood pulsed quicker and stronger through the emperor's weak limbs. And Death himself listened and said, "Go on, little Nightingale, go on. Then will you give back the emperor's sword, the rich silk banner, and will you give up the emperor's crown?" she asked. So Death gave up each of these treasures for a song, and the Nightingale sang on. She sang of the quiet graveyard where the white roses bloom and the elder trees spread their fragrance, and the grass is always fresh, dewed with the tears of the living who mourn. Then Death longed for his garden and floated out the window, cold white mist. Thank you, said the emperor. "You, blessed little heavenly bird, I know you. I banished you from my realm, and yet you've sung the basses away from around my bed and death from my heart. How can I ever repay you?" "You already have," said the bird. "I shall never forget the tears in your eyes the first time I ever sang to you. Rest now and grow well and strong. I will sing to you." And she sang, as the morning sun rose and came spilling in through the open window, and life and health returned to the emperor. None of the courtiers had returned. They all thought he was dead. Only the Nightingale sat by him and sang. "You must remain with me always," said the emperor, You shall sing only when you wish. I would break the mechanical bird into 1,000 pieces. Do not do that, said the bird. The bird did its best for as long as it could. Keep it still. I cannot live in the palace, but let me come when I will. I will come to you in the evening and sit on a branch outside your window and sing to you, that you may be happy and thoughtful too. I will sing of joy and sorrow, of the good and evil hidden all around you. A little singing bird flies far, far, to the fisherman's hut, the peasant's cottage, and many places far from your imperial palace. I love your heart better than your crown, and yet your crown too, the crown too, has an air of the sacred about it. I will come, and I will sing. Only promise me one thing. Everything, said the emperor, as he stood in the imperial robes which he had put on himself, his heavy golden sword pressed at his heart. One thing only, replied the Nightingale. Tell no one. Let no one know that you have a little bird that tells you things. That would be best. And with that, off she flew. Now the servants returned to look in after their dead emperor. And there he stood, to their amazement. And the emperor said, "Good morning." The Emperor and the Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen.